Pamela.
Hello. What's up, Brad?
Oh, great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, Pamela, introduce yourself to the Automating Success audience and tell them about your opening song by John Legend. And just tell us, tell us what it is about that song. I mean, I listened to the song; it's pretty self-explanatory. But tell us when you hear that song, what feelings that kind of get bubbling in you.
So. Yeah. Well, I'm a writer and a business coach and a mom, which you may see children. If anybody's watching video of this, go behind me as we're doing virtual school over here. But I've been in business for 24 years this month, actually. And my main joy is really in connecting people with each other and really in building primarily the leadership capacity of business owners, helping people to feel better, stronger, more capable, but also really in building that connection that we have with each other. So my husband and I do it at our Main Street Learning Lab, which is in downtown Mesa, where we are usually in non-COVID times. But then also I do a lot of it virtually online. So the link, I think, with the John Legend song, I love John Legend. I've written about him extensively. He's a super interesting guy. And who's a former management consultant, actually, like I am. And I love the idea, I know for a lot of people who are interested in making big change in the world, of having that belief that there are other people out there who want to connect, who want to really join together in order to make positive change. And so I always just get that good feeling when I listen to that particular song and just to John Legend in general.
Yeah, I like one of the verses or lines in the song is we can be the change that you want to see, and that to me was one of the most powerful things in that song, because I think, obviously I do this because I, like you, like to connect people and, have people that would not have normally cross paths, like this podcast is doing for us. But then also my young daughter, 20 years old, great business sense, but to kind of hear the for her generation, it's all up to ourselves as leaders. There's not one leader. There's people that are leading teams of people all over the world that need to be a great leader. You have to inspire future leaders. So yeah, that song was awesome for that.
It's so true. I love that. Well, and I was super inspired by my dad, who he passed a couple of years ago, but he was somebody who he was a photographer by trade. And so he loved his profession. So I grew up being around somebody who just loved what he did, which was very influential. But also he always was very much a community builder and a big environmentalist. And he was always quietly working on things and working on initiatives. And so I wrote about him in my last book, Body of Work, where for 30 plus years, he and my bonus mom, Dee, my stepmom, I call her my bonus mom, they and a few other community volunteers bought a 100-year-old school, and over 30 years as volunteers raising money collectively in their small community of 200 people in Port Costa, slowly redid that building and made it into a community center. So it's so neat. I love the connection that you have as father and daughter. And I know for me, it was extremely significant to be really connected with my dad at work. So I was extra happy to see the format and to meet you both in that relationship, because it was a very important thing for the formation of who I am. I love my mom too.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that though, because working with him every day, he is very passionate about everything he does, which makes me obviously more interested in it as well. Since he loves it, I have grown to as well.
It's so cool. Yeah, imagine if every day, like, your dad's like, oh, work is so horrible, and my coworkers and he's just like, ugh, work is horrible.
I'm just gonna feel the same thing naturally with him. So
well, my dad, worked for the city of Elgin, was a union laborer. My mom worked for the city, and they're always talking to me about when I'm going to start thinking about retirement, because they know I'm a serial entrepreneur and I'm always doing things. And I said, guys, I'm so happy with what I do. I don't think about retirement. Like I wake up wanting to do what I do because I don't feel like it's work. And, hopefully for her, she realizes that everybody has to pick their own path. But for me, I just hope that, I wish everybody could find that type of path, and just wake up in the morning and just feel happy to do what they need to get done, and not see it as like something they have to clock into, but see the change they're making or inspiring, So yeah, but I mean, one of the questions first one would be, tell us about young Pam and your family background. So you kind of already started to get into it with your dad. You said you love your mom also. So let's go right into that. Let's learn a little bit more about because we all are just an accumulation of life experience. So let's learn about young Pam a little first.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in a town called San Anselmo, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a really beautiful place with beautiful hiking trails and everything there. And my parents actually divorced when I was 5. So of course that was a difficult thing for that to happen at that time. But one of the things that I really appreciated very much about my parents is that they never do I remember hearing ever during my entire youth any disparaging thing that my dad said about my mom or my mom said about my dad. As an adult, of course, I realized, that must have been so hard, when you're going through that divorce, and to know what that means. But from their perspective, they really were putting our own emotional needs ahead of theirs. Of course, privately, I'm sure they had their conversations with their friends, as you need to do when you're going through a hard time. But it was a great modeling for me at an early age of, interestingly, seeing how even when you can face something that is extremely emotionally challenging, you can approach it in a way that has ethics. You can do it in consideration for, even where folks have to make the difficult decision of separating, that you still are looking for ways to, be connected, be parents, be a family. And I think for my sister, my brother, and I, it did have some financial implications. Marin County, which is where San Anselmo is a pretty wealthy county. But we didn't. My parents moved there really, really early on. Actually paid like $23,000 for a house in 1963 that now I'm sure would be, probably over $1 million, just the way that the real estate has appreciated. But having a financial challenge with my parents being divorced meant that me and my brother and my sister all started working really early. So I started working at age 12 at Swenson's Ice Cream. I was a dishwasher. I made $1.50 an hour. I told that to my kids the other day. They were like, $1.50 an hour. We're like, yep. And I very proudly still say, probably to the, regret of all my family around me, I was assistant manager by age 14. I don't think I was even legally allowed to work, but I received Employee of the Month twice, which I'm still very proud of, right?
Yes,
and it taught me so much about just about commerce, about working as a team, about hard work, about ice cream. I still love ice cream. And my sister and my brother both worked at King Henry VIII, which was a fast food restaurant. So they started at 13 and they worked. So all of us worked our way through college. So, our folks, of course, did what they could to support, but primarily we really made that happen ourselves. So that was something I think that was really important, formative thing. And as I said, one of the big lessons I learned, I still did have a happy childhood. I had lots of friends. I was really interested in the outdoors. I was a very social person. And so I really just enjoyed, we'd go out on adventures. At that time, I remember being like 7 years old and riding my bike up to Phoenix Lake, which is one of my favorite places. Like at 7, I think of that now, like I'd never have let my 7-year-old, ride a bike by themselves. But that's the way that it was in the 70s. So I just, do you remember that? You make me look a little younger than I am, but I'm going to be 54 this month. But it's like, we just did stuff like that. We're like, we'd take off as a group all day. Our parents would have no idea where we were. And then we'd come back just about dark.
Yeah. So I'm 41, but it's funny because I shook my head because there's a study that with every decade of people, we bring our radius tighter and tighter. People are more concerned, and sometimes for not even having a reason of concern. It's just it's something that somebody did a study on it. And I actually wish I knew the actual mileage that parents like try to pull their kids in. And now I think with technology, we're starting to try to boot them out the door again, saying like, go outside and breathe the fresh air. Minus the COVID stuff right now, but so yeah, it's kind of interesting, but yeah, anyways, continue on. I just had to throw that in there. But.
Yeah, no, it's really true. So, I mean, that I know that just growing up like that, and I grew up in the same house. So I was in the same house for my whole childhood up until 16. When I was a senior in high school, I was an exchange student to Switzerland. I went to Neuchâtel, Switzerland for the year. And that started me down on a path of doing a lot of international travel. So I went to a really small college that was focused on international studies called Royal College West. And so I spent my sophomore year in Mexico and my senior year in Colombia, in Bogota. And then I went to Brazil after that because I had started training capoeira, which is Afro-Brazilian martial art. So I kind of went from this being in a smaller town, same house all the time, pretty homogenous white suburban area, to really expanding and just becoming much more of an adventurous traveler in
I would say
early adulthood.
You're very well traveled, and I did see that you have a brown belt. So you can.
I have a black belt actually. I have a black belt in
a black
MMA.
Belt now. So my research was old apparently. Google did me wrong in this one, but
right.
but congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So by studying abroad, what do you think that did for you now? I mean, you had to be able to tie so many life experiences because you have to be, from what I would hear, very independent. You're kind of off on your own. You're away from family. You have to make new friends. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. No, it was an amazing experience. It was something that just made me grow so much, being in a totally different environment. So in high school, I was with a host family. It was a wonderful host family that I stayed with. But all my classes were in French. So I had 11 classes, including chemistry and history and Italian and French, which was very confusing, by the way. But so just the brain power. The Swiss are legendary for being very diligent and studied. And I was coming from like hippie Northern California. And so it really shifted me into a different appreciation for formal education. When I first got to class, everybody would bring out their little pencil holders and they had rulers. They took these impeccable notes, and it was just like such an interesting, different experience from what I was used to in school. So I really developed an appreciation just for a different kind of education. And then in Switzerland in particular, because it is such an international place, I also met students from all over the world. And that really got me excited. I had a really good friend from Ghana, from Venezuela. And it just began to open my mind to so many other places in the world. So I think primarily what was really important is there was a quote from Anais Nin that I wrote down when I was 16, when I was an exchange student, that's still so true today, which is we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And so just our own worldview, if we don't have any experience of stepping outside of that and understanding that people may have a very legitimate reason to see the world the way they do, then we just get really stuck in forming our own idea of, well, this is the way the world is, or this is the way business is, or this is the way that you should operate. And I think having a variety of experiences early on and being in different countries and just seeing the amazing resilience and connection and culture. I know in Mexico, that was so formative for me, of really deeply getting to know the Mexican people, the Mexican culture, just the love and connection and hard work. What was interesting is I lived for the first part of my stay, I lived in Morelia, which is in a city with a host family. And then the second part of the stay, I lived in a small village in Michoacan called La Colonia Benito Juarez with a farming family. And I began to see these connections through generations because my dad's family, my grandparents, had been chicken and peach farmers in Yuba City, California, which is up in the Sacramento Valley. And so I began to meet people in the village where I was staying who had been farm workers. Braceros officially was a program they had starting in World War II, where they would bring farm workers in that continued like through the 60s. And then of course, we've had lots of farm laborers that I know were active in my grandparents' farm, and that my dad grew up with so many of the workers and told so many stories. So it was like having this connection where all of a sudden beginning to see from a different perspective, like what life was like, what the opportunities were like for folks there. I remember my mom came and visited me when I was there, and or actually we had come together. It was after I had done World Study, and we came back to do a visit, and I had sent them a letter telling them that we were coming. And so we arrived there, which is, takes a little bit, go to Mexico City, take a bus, take another bus, to get there. And we arrived, and we went out to the fields where they were farming their corn and beans. And they were like, oh, how are you? And they stopped and, they greeted us and everything. And let's go up to the house. And we were there probably for like a half of the afternoon. And I said, did you get my letter? And they were like, no, what letter? So
this was a surprise visit for them.
It was a surprise. And my mom and I were laughing. We were like, can you imagine in our like city life, what it would be like if people just showed up at our doorstep unexpected? We would be like, oh man, I have an appointment and I have to get to work and it's so complicated. And they were just so gracious. So I know from my mom's perspective, having that experience with me, she said it really helped her to understand and have empathy for the Mexican people that she saw and that she knew within California, which is where she still is.
Yeah, something for us, like, so we're definitely not as well traveled, and growing up, I was,
maybe yet, right?
Yeah. I was a family of 5, so my parents, like, we didn't have a lot of means to travel in the first place. But something that I found, especially now that we've gotten so involved in automation, like one of the robots we bring in are from Switzerland, and so I'm dealing with all these different people, Husqvarna, Swedish, in America, and you brought up how, we don't see things how they are, we see them how we are, is Americans think we're so far ahead in the world, but it's because we're not well traveled, so then you go to these other places in the world, and we only perceive the world to be as what we see in a picture or a snapshot, but we really don't have a clue how other people live, so I love hearing like these experiences you had, because I think you're painting a very good picture. So, of just, it's like you have to get out there and experience things, and I encourage that.
Right. Where you have the opportunity. I know we can't really travel right now, but I hope, for your daughter and for you that, down the road, it just does. It is such a illuminating and wonderful experience. And to me, if you're asking about how some of those early formative experiences really shaped my worldview today and who I am, I think as a community builder, as somebody, my husband is Navajo, so I'm in a cross-cultural marriage, and so he grew up on the reservation, in the Navajo reservation, so I have wonderful in-depth connection with his culture. So as a part of my lived experience is always like living with one foot in each culture. Yeah. And then also in our community, there are people that come from so many different backgrounds. So what it feels to me like as somebody who is building community, building connections, and helping people to build business, is just like more expansive. It's feeling that connection of being more connected with more people. I don't feel afraid, of anybody. Yeah. There's that warmth. Pretty much anybody who happens to be walking down the street is like, oh my gosh, you're just like my best friend or my cousin or the person I stayed with here. You have that expanded feeling of we are family, because we actually are. We're biologically all family. We're all related. Yeah. And so the more that you have that kind of feeling and you live with that feeling, it's very comforting. It's very expansive. And so that is an experience that I love to be sharing with people who sometimes might be afraid of other people, or, like, why do we need to worry? Why can't we just make everybody be exactly like us? And to me, I just say, boy, we are missing out on so much if you lose the opportunity to hear other people's stories, to look at the world from a different perspective. It actually makes me feel so much like stronger, more comforted, and more connected. as opposed to like afraid and just like trying to hold on to my own,
Well,
whatever piece of the pie I have.
Yeah, well, and we've only spoken for 20 minutes, and I can already know, I already see this is how you're such a good leader and how you can speak. Because to be a good leader, you have to be willing to understand other people. And so I picked that up literally within the first 20 minutes of our conversation. I feel like anybody could walk in front of you and you'd be able to pick up, their culture, their background, and try to figure out their best path and how you could help them along it. That's like what I'm picking up right away.
I appreciate that.